Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call the January 17th meeting of Santa Barbara's Board of Harbor Commissioners to order. Emily, would you call roll, please?
Yes. Bill Spicer.
Here.
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Betsy Kramer.
Here.
Lang Sly.
Here.
John Stedman.
Here.
Shoham Yaini.
Here.
Merritt McRae.
Here.
Scott Reedman.
We're okay at that point. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Reedman, any changes to tonight's agenda?
Mr. Chair, no changes to the agenda tonight.
Very good. I wanted to wish everyone a Happy New Year, as this is our first meeting since November. Also wanted to everybody extend a welcome to Emily Gallarde, who's taking over here with her first meeting. Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, Emily. I've also been asked to remind all the commissioners that when you do speak, make sure that your microphone is on so that this can be captured for all time. So, with this point, we're at the public comment. I didn't see any slips. Oh, I take that back.
This will not be for public comment, but this will be for review, so information later.
Okay.
Also,
Gotcha, gotcha. Very good, thank you. With that, we move into the approval of the minutes.
move to approve.
We have one, a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a Jim and Betsy. Please use your microphone.
So I move to approve the minutes.
And Commissioner Kramer has seconded that. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Abstain?
One abstention? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Just bear with us. Okay. We have a Harbor Matters, some good news. Mr. Reedman, you want to fill us in?
Sure. Betsy Kramer, Commissioner Kramer, has been reappointed for another 4 years, starting January 1st. She's been on the commission since March of 2007, which is the longest person on this current commission. And after 17 years, it looks like she wants to take, or after 11 years, it looks like she wants to take on 4 more. So must be the good pay or something. Ms. Kramer has served on the budget committees, subcommittees, chartering and business activity permit committee, subcommittee, local coastal program update, parking, and others over the years, but that's currently, I believe, what the current makeup. So we really appreciate the service. That's a long run, and so thank you very much for your service, and welcome back aboard.
My pleasure. Thank you. I never would have expected to be here this long. There it is.
Me either.
We welcome your wisdom.
Thank you.
With that, unless Commissioner Kramer, if you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to the director's report. Mr. Reedman.
Okay, well, in line with what we were just talking about, the department conducted a promotional within the city recruitment to fill Jeanette Prusinski's former position as executive assistant and Harbor Commission secretary, and we recently hired Emily Gallarde to fill the positions. Emily previously worked at the city's community development department and also at the county of Santa Barbara prior to that. So she has experience in these kind of board hearings and so forth. On December 13th, the department held a publicly noticed budget committee meeting with Commissioners Kramer, Sloan, and Sly. The subcommittee members and staff dove deeper into the budget process than is practical to do it at this size of a meeting, reviewing the 6-year cash flow, which is a pretty intricate and large spreadsheet, and how that relates to the 6-year capital program. The money coming in ties out to the capital program. Debt coverage ratios required by the Department of Waterways loan and department operating reserves. No members of the public attended, although it was publicly noticed in the normal fashion of a regular Harbor Commission meeting. And tentative agendas for next month, February, municipal code amendments, mid-year budget status, which is kind of questionable. We haven't received the numbers yet, so, and then fiscal year 19 year-end revenue projections. And with that, I'll conclude the report unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions?
No questions.
All right, well, I appreciate it. We'll move on to facility management report. Mr. Triberg?
Good evening, Chair Spicer and Commissioners. Tonight I'm going to give you an update on our Marina access control key card exchange and some Harbor Patrol boats. As you may recall, we began the key card access control exchange back in August. What we started off with was notifying slip permittees via our web-based Blackboard Connect system. It's kind of like a reverse 911 system. And we'd notify about 1 to 2 docks at a time starting in Marina 1. We would allow those slip holders we would allow slip holders 1 week to exchange their key cards. If they didn't do so during that week, they could come anytime afterwards, but we would turn off their key cards at the end of that 1 week. So when they would come down after that, they would sort of pretty much have to come through, and that kind of helped keep us current. It could exchange up to 5 key cards. As you may recall, we, Council and the Commission, approved a fee resolution change where key cards over 5, the 6 key card and beyond, were $100 each. We did that sort of as a disincentive to make sure people weren't just obtaining more key cards than was absolutely necessary. We've also exchanged key cards with our business activity permit holders, BAPs, and visitors. So we've done all of Marina 1 and all of Marina 2, and we've notified 807 slip permittees. Of those, 660 have exchanged key cards, and they've obtained 1,828 key cards. So it's about 3 per slip. So that seems about the right amount for folks. We've had a total of 14 key cards purchased at $100. So I think it's proven to be a pretty effective disincentive, and we've certainly helped us reduce the number of key cards in circulation. We've also exchanged key cards with BAPs and visitors. We've had 38 of the 57 BAPs exchange key cards. BAPs that are also slip permittees exchange under the slip permit, so we have a fair amount of folks doing that, so that's probably why we don't have quite as many exchanged. We've also exchanged 458 visitors key cards. I'm not certain how many visitors we get every year, but that's about the average number. We're a little bit down on our visitors lately, but it gives you an indication that we do have quite a few people rolling through the harbor on a regular basis, and they're exchanging their old key cards. Most people keep them and have them activated when they come in to visit, especially the repeat customers, such as a lot of the commercial fishermen. And they can obtain up to, once again, 5 key cards or more if they want to pay the price. So overall, originally we had over 20,000 key cards issued since 2003, and it was become an issue, as I've reported out to the Commission before. We've done 1,000 exchanges so far. We've issued 3,329 key cards and deleted 5,550 of those that we're exchanging. So this is about the ratio that we're going to see going forward of the amount of key cards that were out there active and the amount that are being reissued and exchanged. So it's a pretty successful. It's quite a significant reduction. We're going to resume next week with the Marina 3 A finger, B and C, and Marina 4 A and B. So that's 5 more weeks. We should be finished by the end of February. And in general, it's been a success. Our front counter staff has done a great job. I think when folks come in to exchange their key cards, they're doing it very quickly. And the ultimate goal was to go from something over 20,000 key cards to something more manageable. When we're all is said and done, we'll probably be about 7,000 or 8,000 key cards. So I think that's a fairly good measure of success. In March 2017, I gave the Commission an update on Harbor Patrol Boats 1 and 2. We have 4 Harbor Patrol boats in the fleet. At the time, we had just finished replacing Harbor Patrol Boat 1 and significant repower of Boat 2. Recently, we just completed a repower of Harbor Patrol Boat 3. Harbor Patrol Boat 3 is a 1999 Norsco Marine hull. It's an aluminum hull that we bought out of Washington, I believe. And it's been a challenging boat to maintain ever since. Right out the gate, we had problems with trim and hull material, to the extent that in 2007 we did sort of a specialized survey, and we had some recommendations to help us maintain the hull integrity. Steel hulls, metallic hulls are subject to electrolysis, different types of erosion you don't see in fiberglass hulls. And the survey was very helpful, and the boats have run pretty well since then. I've mentioned in the past we are capitalizing our repower of these patrol boats because it's pretty expensive, so they show up in our capital improvement program. So we had $200,000 budgeted in FY 2018 to repower Patrol Boat 3. We received a low bid of $160,000, and keep in mind, these are gas-powered engines, and we were going to convert to diesel-powered. Diesel's more reliable. We thought it was a good idea. We got a low bid of $160,000, and the low bidder and all the other bidders complained or expressed concern about the integrity of the hull and the modifications they'd have to do to change out the fuel tanks and do other things to have diesel engines put in as opposed to gas engines. So we rejected all those bids. We consulted back with the surveyor from 2007, and he said, you really shouldn't change the hull at all if you can avoid it. Do one more repower, and at the end of this next probably 5 or 6 years, it'd probably be time to replace the boat. So we went back out to bid with gas engines to avoid the hull modifications, and it got a low bid of $61,000. So we saved a lot of money, which was great, but we've had challenges with the installation with motor mounts and the exhaust system. It's a little hard to see. These are the new engines, Crusaders on the left side. And, the engines that we replaced were probably 5 or 6 years old, 7 years old, and the motor mounts have just changed. So if you don't have the exact same motor mounts, it requires modifications to the stringer or to the motor mounts. It's just been a tremendous challenge. And furthermore, if you look back on the right-hand side, this is the muffler right back here. We had to tear it apart and re-glass in another fitting because the exhaust system on the newer engines doesn't align with the exhaust system from the old engine. So this has been weeks in the making, frustrating for all of us and for Harbor Patrol. But we finally got it back in service, so now it's running properly and we're getting hours on it, and we're pleased with that. The smallest boat in our fleet is Harbor Patrol Boat 4. It's a rigid inflatable boat. It's designed really for rescues in the surf zone. All the other boats are much too big. We've had a boat similar to this for quite some time. And the last boat was replaced in 2007. So as I mentioned, it's designed to operate in a rough surf zone. We bid it out. We had a low bid of $32,000. We bought a new hull, shock absorbing seat, 50 horsepower engine, all the safety equipment. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of surf zone rescues, but the boat's there when we need it. It's really also quite nice for maneuvering in tight spaces. We use it quite a bit. Now it's a reliable boat. It's the kind of boat you want to make sure that it works perfectly every time, especially if you're going into the surf zone. So replacing it was a good idea. Now our fleet is complete and in good shape. We don't have a repower scheduled for about 4 or 5 more years. Then we'll start up with that again, and Boat 3 will probably be replaced in about 6 years. So it's been quite a bit of work these last few years, but the fleet's in good shape, and we're pleased with that, and hopefully the Harbor Patrol can put it to good use. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions? Well, okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Cronman, Harbor Operations.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Well, it seems like a long time ago because we took December off, but it was just last month we had our 2018 Parade of Lights, and I can tell you that it was, well, we got very lucky in between a lot of storms in early December and all the storms we've had in January. We had a picture-perfect night for Parade of Lights, so somebody's looking out for us. It was clear, it was calm, it was absolutely gorgeous night, and 27 boats entered the parade this time, decorated to the theme of Hollywood holidays, and this was the 32nd annual Parade of Lights. It's it's our signature holiday time event. After the event really started at 3 p.m. with the Santa's Village event, where this is really amazing, the most I've ever seen. 600 children lined up all the way down to the Marina 1 gate entrance from the city pier, and visited with Santa and played in a 10-ton snowfield. And from there, the parade was a great success, and after that we had a really outstanding awards party. It filled to capacity. Chuck's Waterfront Grill catered it, and it was one of the more memorable events of the Parade of Lights in several years. I would be remiss if I didn't announce the first place winners publicly here. In each category, they included Perseverance, Commercial Fishing, Channel Cat, and Commercial Other, SS Minnow in Power, the Sirocco and Sail, and Santa in Human Power. Those were, I really take our hats off to the folks that get out there in kayaks and paddle boards in the middle of the night in a December evening and to paddle around all decorated and what have you. They showed a lot of grit, and it was a lovely evening. So the SS Minnow grabbed the grand prize honors, taking an award package that included at the top a $500 in cash, crisp $100 bills. And this year's event was sponsored by the 2018 Parade of Lights Committee, the City of Santa Barbara's Waterfront Department, that'd be us, the Harbor Merchants Association, the Stearns Wharf Business Association, and the Yacht Club. And so if you like this kind of stuff, we sure do. You can circle your calendars now for next year's Parade of Lights, the 33rd Annual Parade of Lights on Sunday, December 8th, 2019. And that concludes my brief report tonight. I'll be back to chat with you at Staff Communications, and I'll be here next month to present the proposed municipal code amendments. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mick. Any questions?
I have a
Merritt
question. First of all, a comment. The food that Chuck's Waterfront Grill provided for a chilled group of mariners is really, really good. It was hot and a lot and delicious. So I wanted to thank them. And I was wondering if, Mick, if you remember any of the prizes that the participants won and who donated those.
Sure, Commissioner McCrae. There were a lot of restaurant prizes, local restaurants. There were a lot of wineries that contributed, hotels contributed, a lot of local harbor merchants. I apologize for not remembering every one of them, but almost all the harbor merchants in the harbor commercial area, the dive shop, the electronics shop, Brophy Brothers, they all chipped in with gift certificates, Chuck's Waterfront Grill. So there were tons of gift certificates, labor and parts and what have you from the local commercial area leaseholders. And then outside of that, from the local area, we had a lot of hotels, family packs to the zoo and things like that. So it was really had a community exterior, if you will, and then a real focus in the harbor area itself. It was a combination of those. I will tell you, though, and I use this term metaphorically, they were rich prize packages, and it's well worth participating in this event, if not for anything else, if you want to get one of those prizes.
Any others? I just might add that I thought that the firework display at the end of the event was spectacular, and I believe we may have gotten a more bang for our buck because of last year's cancellation, and whoever's in charge of that part gets my compliments.
That's true, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for reminding me of that. That was Garden State Fireworks, and they did a fantastic job this year after the unfortunate cancellation because of the Thomas Fire last year. And I also wanted to remember to thank the Conways for the vintners put on a heck of a VIP party as the parade was going on. So it's one of those events where everybody just teams up and does the right thing, and between contributions from various vendors and leaseholders and the participants in the parade and the Santa's Village, it really came together. It was a nice event.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
With that, we move on to item number 6 and new business. Emily, do you want to update us?
So item number 6, West Beach Splash Playground. Recommendation that the Harbor Commission receive a presentation and provide advisory comments on the West Beach Splash Playground.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is George Thompson, and this is Justin Van Mullum. We both work for the city's Parks and Recreation Department, and specifically we work on capital projects, so oversee design and construction. And thank you for the opportunity this evening to present a new project that the city is undertaking right now. The reason that we're here, namely, is because the project that we're talking about is within the harbor area. And furthermore, we're in a preliminary design process for this project, and we'll get very deep into what we're proposing to do. But we've already been to the Historic Landmarks Commission. We're on track to go to the Planning Commission in pursuit of a coastal development permit. And so the recommendation to the Harbor Commission this evening is to provide advisory comments on the project to the Planning Commission, and eventually those will get routed back to the Historic Landmarks Commission. So with that, we'll jump right in. The project area is located at what is currently a closed facility, the West Beach Wading Pool, which is next to Los Baños. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's in a really highly visible area of the waterfront right next to Cabrillo Boulevard. It's very unfortunate that it is closed, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is. But essentially, the project area that we're talking about is outlined there in yellow. So a little bit of background about the wading pool. It was rebuilt in the late 70s, but originally it was built as part of the Los Baños complex, and so it's been there coming up on 80 plus years. It has experienced a ton of use throughout the decades as a swimming facility, and particularly for kids learning how to swim and eventually graduating to the ocean and our other swimming facilities. In 2014, it was unfortunate. We had to close the pool for several reasons. Primarily, there was a leak, and we didn't know exactly where the leak was, but it was determined to be somewhere underneath the concrete slab. And so in order to actually pinpoint it, we would have had to do some destructive testing, basically rip up the slab and or the pool structure itself. At the same time, we're going through the drought and are still in the drought, and so it was a good opportunity to close the pool, save on water usage, and evaluating reopening the pool as it is, we would need to, one, repair the leak. But since that time, there have also been a lot of upgrades in terms of accessibility requirements that are mandated by federal laws and state building codes. So namely, we would have to put in an accessible ramp into the pool, which is another big ticket item. And then there's also upgrades in the health code. So we would have to increase our pool water treatment cycles. So for all of those reasons, we really stepped back and looked at, well, is reopening a wading pool the best option? And we determined no. There are other alternatives that would probably serve similar purposes and get similar use and enjoyment by the community. And one of those options is to look at how we operated the wading pool before. It was really open primarily during the summer months and within the summer months during certain times. And so it was a pretty limited availability throughout the year. So looking at a new facility, how can we expand it to provide use throughout the year? It's going to be 70 degrees on Saturday. It'd be a good opportunity to go to a park and enjoy some outdoor time. And then, of course, we get those summer months where it is a little bit colder and the fog rolls in. What amenities can we provide to kids and their caretakers during those months? So really looking at this new concept of what's called a splash playground, and then we'll go into details about what that means, and combining that with a traditional playground, which is actually on the site currently. It's a small maritime themed playground. And then looking at the context of the site, obviously we have the ocean and the harbor, all of the vibrancy associated with those areas, and some great design themes that really rise to the top when we talk about designing a playground facility. So this new concept it's called a splash pad or a splash playground, and the great thing about it is water is front and center. So it's about splashing, it's about spraying, flowing, misting, all of these different types of water features. But the great thing from an operational standpoint and a cost standpoint is there is no standing water there. So the incidents of drownings and the requirements to have staff lifeguards, you don't have all of that associated with the project. And so the operational costs are a lot lower. There are a variety of different jets that can be placed into the structure to provide interest for all different age groups. And as I mentioned before, it can be used year-round. It's not just a summertime pool facility. The other great thing about this is you don't need to know how to swim in order to enjoy the facility. So when we're talking about this sort of feature, we're talking about anyone as young as a toddler or even, a baby could use this facility and enjoy it, all the way up to the preteen age. So stepping back to where we've been, about 8 months ago we hired a design firm to help us get a preliminary design on paper and start the permitting process and outreach. In May we held an on-site community workshop and presented some design concepts. It was well received, and we'll talk about that. And then we went to one of our other community swimming pools and just kind of vetted the idea. Is a splash playground something that pool users would use? And in case I didn't mention it before, we don't have a splash playground in the city. There's no public splash playground. There's none in Carpinteria. There's not one in Goleta. Really, the closest one is down in Ventura. But if you look at the state and across the nation, these things have been around for 20 plus years, and most communities of our size have them. We're a little bit behind in the times in that respect. So we took the project to the Parks and Rec Commission, the Neighborhood Advisory Council. They both provided positive comments about the project and support it. And then in October, we started the design review process, namely going to the Historic Landmarks Commission and starting environmental review. Going to the community meeting, so this is on site. You can see the chemical building wall there associated with Los Baños, and then the marina in the background there. Just to summarize the main points, generally the attendees really supported the concept. They liked the fun design, how it can be used with or without water. They liked the particular aspects of the design that we were proposing. They liked the themes that we were proposing and how it really is Santa Barbara. If this project is, as conceived, is going to be constructed, it'll be an icon for this area of town. And we anticipate that it would be used a lot. And there was an interesting aspect of the community meeting regarding nesting birds on site. And so we'll talk about how we both protect the birds, but also take advantage of that opportunity to provide some education and outreach about that important bird habitat. So I'm going to turn it over to Justin Van Mullum and talk about the design.
Thank you, George. So during the community workshop, there was quite a bit of talk about the birds. As you can imagine, we were right there on site, and that's the black-crowned night herring that you see up in the upper right-hand corner. Not only were parents and caretakers fascinated by what was going on in the trees, but of course kids were as well. And through this community process, we changed some of the iconic elements. As you can see, there are ones that are local, right in the proximity of the harbor, and I'll talk a little bit more about those on other slides. Just to orient you to the site, there's a couple elements. It's been a couple of years since this has been open, so let me just kind of point these out. So here we have Cabrillo Boulevard, and we have the Paseo that is between the wading pool and Los Baños Del Mar pool. We also have another kind of border, which is our beachway multimodal path. Then George talked a little bit about the existing playground, which is a climbing structure, also has a swing set associated with it and a slide, and we have some picnic tables in 2 different locations. You can see some of the photos and the locations those photos were taken. Here's the playground from Cabrillo Boulevard. We also have the roosting trees that we discussed at the corner of where the sidewalk and the Paseo meet, and we have the Paseo looking towards Cabrillo Boulevard. And the photograph 4 is in the middle of the wading pool, looking towards Los Baños, and then the photograph 5 and 6 are from the beachway looking both west and east. This slide was in your packet with the staff report, and I think it really does a good job of illustrating a lot of the similarities between the two designs. Like I mentioned before, we have the perimeter is pretty much the same perimeter that is being used in the existing conditions, except for existing conditions have it broken up into 3 or 4 parts with fencing. Our plan is to kind of combine everything all together with one fenced-in area. We have the splash playground wet zone is in the center, about where the pool is currently, and we've got a playground, climbing structure, and swing set with a slide approximately in the same area. We also have picnic tables as well in the proposed plan. But one of the differences is we're proposing a restroom building right in this location, which will also have an area to access the pool equipment. And then there'll be a lot more seating opportunities within the new proposed plan, as well as play elements. This is a good slide just to kind of talk about the overall theme. The splash area, the wet zone that's located in the center, is blue, different color blues. It's a resilient rubber, so if you would fall on it as a child, that it would be a little bit safer. And then on the perimeter is sand-colored concrete, so as if it was a beach where parents would sit around the perimeter, or the caretakers. Starting with number 1, this is the fence and gate. That's the gated entry, which is approximately the same location as currently. And you'd walk in and you would see these palm trees and the undulating rubber that looks like waves in this boat element. You'd also have a restroom building. This is a harbor entry buoy, similar to the one that was in that iconic photo with the seals. It's a climber for children. And then the life-size boat that is a harbor patrol boat seen in that same element. And there are some perspectives of a lot of these different elements that I'll show later in the slideshow. The Lifeguard tower, also true to size, and then it's a smaller for tots, or the smaller children, climber that is shaped like a starfish, and we have the kelp forest and eelgrass tunnels with a swing set. And then it's a good time to point out our 20-foot buffer that we've established with the roosting trees and our hardscape and the slide that is shaped like one of the black-crowned night herons. We also have one of the things that parents and caretakers talked about would be how nice it could be if there was a place that could be rented, reserved for parties, for birthdays, and that's what we've kind of created in this area with number 9. What kid wouldn't want to come to a facility like this? This is just such an exciting perspective as you walk into the entry. And this is taken about the middle of the splash pad, and you see all sorts of kids in mists or sprayers, and some of them might be timed to come up if you walk by with motion sensors. Some might be that you push a button and you can spray your sibling or parent. So there's a lot of things going on. You see the life-size harbor patrol boat and the iconic Lifeguard tower with the slide. And then over in the far right-hand corner are some parents that are getting a break in the shade on one of the several seating options. Now this is pretty exciting. This is a perspective that's taken from the eye of a child and what they might experience. And it's a climber that, once again, we don't have a climber in the city of Santa Barbara. And a city of this size typically would have a playground with a climber like this. This one is modeled after this kelp forest that you're swimming through, and it also has this eelgrass tunnels that you can run through. And you really get a sense of being in that ocean. The perspective is taken from the seawall, right behind the seawall, the historic seawall that separates the park and the sidewalk. And one of the things that this doesn't show that you'd see if you were looking at it from the street is there's several new palm trees that would help break up this element. The taller elements of this climber are farther away from the street to kind of reduce the mass and scale. And here is the black crown night herring slide. It's a very creative way to put a slide that's integrated in with the landscape. Each wing is a slide, so you climb up from the back and you can come around. It's a slide that's meant for younger children. And then there'd also be an educational component that talks about the birds that are roosting in the trees and their habitat, and when they come and go from Santa Barbara, because they're only here for a few months out of the year. Here's our restroom building, and it would accommodate 2 lockable stalls. And then you'd come out of that lockable stall and there would be a vestibule and there'd be 4 sinks. And the idea behind that is that it keeps kind of the traffic flowing so little kids don't get caught up in the toilet room. They can wash their hands and be kind of keep the traffic moving. We also have the equipment room in the back that we discussed. And this building would be locked with the park after the park closed. It would be a part of the locked facility. And finally, our next steps in the spring of 2019, we hope to be at the Planning Commission for approval. Summer of 2019 would be Historic Landmarks Commission final design approval, and then in the fall of that same year, we hope to complete our construction drawings. Our construction schedule, of course, is dependent on funding, and we're looking at general fund allocations along with several grants, both state and local. The idea is to get a project that is shovel-ready so we can be prepared when that money is available. I think this is a good slide to end the presentation on. It really gives you a vision of the existing 1977 pool and what it could be revitalized to. That's the end of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure some of our commissioners have questions. I will say that having raised kids, and anybody who's been to a splash playground, they are quite a great facility. So with that, I'd ask the commissioners if they had some questions. Commissioner Kramer.
Yeah, it's certainly different than what's there presently, or what was there in 2014. One thing I'm wondering about, well, 2 things. Have you considered perhaps having salt water, and how can the city has banned all fountains and so forth? How can there be a water thing like this there? So that's basically 2 questions.
Regarding the second question, maybe I can address that one first because it might inform the first question. So what we've done is look at what the existing use was. So it's a wading pool that uses water, and the proposed splash playground would be a recirculating system. There are systems throughout the country that are one and done water use. So the sprayer emits water, it goes to a drain, and it goes straight to the sewer system. This system that we're proposing is similar to the wading pool system in that the water is collected and reused. Now, there is some water loss through evaporation and so forth, but this would be less water would be used than the wading pool. In terms of salt water, we haven't found systems like this that utilize salt water. There are some issues that obviously come up in terms of corrosion and so forth, so we haven't found a commercially available system that is viable.
Okay, well, I mean, it just seems sort of contradictory the way that Santa Barbara has been going in terms of not allowing any fountains to, again, allow this. And I'm not making any statement about the attractiveness of this or not. But Seems strange. And I want to thank you, though, for thinking about the birds, because it's a nesting area, roosting area for the night-crowned herons. And it's, as you undoubtedly have noticed, it's pretty popular with both the herons and the gulls.
It is, and maybe I can add a little bit more in terms of, a perceived contradictory stance on water use. This is a community resource, so whether the water use comes online or not, the design that we're proposing with this project is, again, a playground that can be used year-round. We do have the ability to turn off the water if we have a prolonged drought. But regardless of the splash component or not, this is going to be a facility that can be used as a playground and by the wider community. So it's not a privately owned fountain, a privately owned facility. This is really for the entire community.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Go on.
So I have a couple of questions or comments. It's a really beautiful design. I really like the how you guys attach it to the ocean and the ocean theme. I think it's been great with kids. What I noticed was lacking was anything about parking and how, or if that would be at all addressed, or any changes to the parking in the surrounding area to accommodate all the traffic that it will be receiving.
So we've started to look at potential parking areas, and we do have the park across the street, which has a large parking lot. We have the historic use of the wading pool using the adjacent parking both on Cabrillo as well as in the waterfront lots. In terms of the use compared to the wading pool, we're going to start looking at the comparative numbers, but from our photographic historic evidence, we've got photos of upwards 100 plus people within the wading pool, and we expect, certain times of the year or certain times of the day that we would have a similar use at this pool facility, at the splash playground facility.
I have a feeling that what will happen, it will also not only draw people locally, but also from out-of-towners with kids, especially if people are coming up to go to the zoo on a summer day and they're looking for something else to do. I think the numbers for this will be a lot more popular than the wading pool. Just being a parent of a 1-year-old kid and knowing what it's like going down to LA and to a wading, a splash pad there. It's very, very popular. So hopefully maybe, we could see about, if it's possible, like a redesign of the harbor parking lot to accommodate, like a 1 hour, 2 hour parking stalls or meter parking, something that would allow people to park there for not, for a short-term basis so that they can come and go, or make it easier for them to park and allow them to stay. Another thing I noticed is, or if possible, to add lockers or a place for them to put strollers or their bags. If that's something you guys have thought about, have you guys thought about that in the design?
We've actually looked at stroller parking. So within the reservable picnic areas, as well as the stationary seating areas surrounding the wet splash area. So we've kind of outlined areas where you can leave a stroller, both when you come into the gated area. But really the overall design is you're there with your stuff. You're not leaving your stuff and then going for a walk through the harbor. You're there with your stuff. And so we haven't accommodated lockers per se. What we're really expecting people to do is find a seat, set up your stuff, your lunch, your towels, all that stuff for several hours, and then proceed on your way.
Have you guys given any thought to the transient population in the area that frequents that?
Yes, we have, and really the way we're approaching that is, one, designing a facility that is going to encourage a lot of activity, and from parents, caretakers, grandparents, kids, and then also having access control. So it'll be a gated facility with the ability to lock the gate after the facility is closed. And importantly, the restroom itself is going to be locked as well when the facility is not open.
Thank you.
John?
Yes, I have a couple questions. Mr. Thompson, is that correct? What is, you talked about a recirculating water system, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So what's the implication for sanitation in a system like that?
So the state actually mandates very specific criteria in terms of how often the water is recirculated and to what level it needs to be treated. It's essentially the same set of rules that we need to comply with as public swimming pools. So it's very specific.
I see. And another general question, what is the liability of a recreational area like this compared to a pool? Has that been measured?
In terms of measurement?
Well, the reason I ask is because I used to use that pool when I was a kid. And you know, when you fall into a pool, the shock is absorbed, right? But here, and I think Mr. Van Mullen commented about the shock absorption quality of this sort of splash area. Is it really the same?
So let me try to answer that in the context of playground rules, because we do have the aspect of it is a splash playground, and so there's the water component that gets treated via a system similar, as I mentioned, to swimming pools. Then we have the playground rules, which specify fall heights and what types of equipment you can have in there, and there's a whole set of rules that govern that. And so a lot of the liability gets taken care of through the building code and through the Playground Manufacturers Association. So one example is the fall height off of that mock harbor patrol boat is going to be mandated that we have a rubber surface under there to account for impact attenuation. Similar things such as hooks and other aspects of the design of the structures where a kid may be playing on it and could get hung up by his clothing. So there are playground inspectors that would be involved in this project. There's playground designers for all of the specific equipment that we're proposing to use. So a lot of the issues that you're discussing are taken care of through those design avenues and regulatory mandates.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lang?
First of all, great concept, I think. Well planned. I have two questions. One, why is the Planning Commission and the Historic Landmark Commission involved? Seems like double jeopardy. I'm not used to seeing them around down here, the HLC. And secondly, realizing it's early in the game, but if you have generated any preliminary cost figures, production figures for the whole thing.
Well, the Planning Commission is involved because we need to get a coastal development permit. And the Historic Landmarks Commission is looking at the design as well as potential impacts to Los Baños, which is a city landmark and also on the National Register of Historic Places. So that's why both of those bodies are involved in the project. And in terms of cost, we're still at a very preliminary stage, but really the next phase will be really getting into the design details of, okay, we've got this great concept of a harbor patrol boat. We're not going to go to the Radin shop and order up a boat. We're going to look at, okay, how does one manufacture a custom structure like that doesn't need to be waterproof and survive as a boat? So there's various options to go through. Concrete manufacturers, fiberglass manufacturers that design playground equipment, and that'll be the next stage, is looking at all these different aspects. So at this point, we don't have an accurate cost estimate. We will be looking at cost savings through design, obviously, as we do through all of our projects. How can we still deliver that exciting, innovative project, but not have a dollar amount that it'll never get constructed? So that'll be the next phase. And we didn't mention, we'd be happy to return to the commission or through Mr. Reedman, through one of his director's reports, give you a more regular update on how this project is moving forward.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like the Harbor District might have an aluminum hulled boat that they might make a deal with.
My thoughts exactly. Okay. Oh, Jim, please.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I think it's a great idea. That's a little bit of an eyesore down there right now, so I think it'll be a great improvement. Just on the security for a second, are you envisioning keeping the current fence, or fence height, I guess, is my real question, or were you thinking of something different for
If I
security?
could answer that question. The existing fence is a chain link, and I believe it's 5 feet tall, and we're looking at doing something a little bit more decorative to match with the historic integrity of the building next door that would be probably 6 feet tall for security purposes.
Will it be see-through like a chain link, or are you thinking a wall?
No, it would be see-through, wrought iron, something probably similar to what you see along Chase Palm Park.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I guess I just, second to that, I just echo the parking issue. You know, the Harbor Main fills up a lot more than it used to and things like that. So just something we need to keep an eye on, so.
And, you know, just to talk a little bit about that, we could also remind visitors that there is over 222 parking spaces that are free at the Pershing Park, and it's only about a block and a half walk.
Right, good idea. Yep. All right, well, thank you very much.
Okay. Let me echo, thank you for the presentation. And as a family man, although my family's too old to probably enjoy this, I think this is a great call. I did have a couple questions. This might be a little silly. The restrooms looked like there was only one or two total. Is that all there's room for, or is that what you anticipate the need for? I know sometimes little kids got to go when they got to go. So I just didn't know if that was an adequate number.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, we're still studying the number of fixture units that will be required to provide, and that's going to be through the building process and the DART process, which we are currently in.
Okay. And then I guess my last question, this is a city public facility, but for funding, is naming rights an option? Is that a funding option?
Mr. Chair, that's to be determined.
Very good. Very good. Well, if that's it, then again, please, I thank you for the report. And I believe the Commission would love updates along the way on that schedule you showed earlier on how it's coming along. That'd be great.
The Spicer splash pad does have a nice ring to it.
That it does. Thank you. Maybe a little steep for my budget, but thank you. That's right.
So before we end, I think that this item was for action. So if there are kind of summary comments that could be provided, that would be helpful going down the line. I think that we have the general understanding that the Commission supports it, but I believe that we're here for action. So if there's a motion.
Just one second.
Right. I may be mistaken, but
I don't know that we need a motion. I think,
Yeah, Mr. Riedman, I don't see motion on here, but I do see the providing the comments.
Right, and what I think we can do in the interest of saving time is when we go through, when Emily goes through the
welcome aboard
report,
comes back with the minutes.
Comes back with the minutes. What we can do at the same time concurrently is just go through what everybody contributed in terms of concerns and so forth, and just get
That'd be very helpful.
Get a copy of that rather than go through the whole works again.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, would that be adequate?
That would be great.
Commissioner Kramer has one more follow-up.
Yeah, I'd make one suggestion. Might be helpful to have an educational exhibit there of the wildlife, of the herons, of the gulls, and also the egrets, which are in that area, of the natural history, basically, of the waterfront. Might be interesting.
Very.
That'll be noted in the minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Gentlemen,
much.
appreciate it.
Excellent. The mushroom is going to go.
Bear with me for a moment. You good? Okay. All right, we are on to item number 7. Emily, you want to update us?
Item 7, license agreement with Santa Barbara Youth Selling Foundation. Recommendation that the Harbor Commission recommend council approve a 5-year license agreement with one 5-year option with the Santa Barbara Youth Selling Foundation for a 2,500 square foot water space in Marina 1 at a base rent of $778.87 per month.
Thank you. Mr. Bossi.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The nonprofit Santa Barbara Youth Sailing Foundation has been in the Santa Barbara Harbor since 1968. The 2,500 square foot site in Marina 1 is used as a dock facility and dry boat storage area for the foundation and its sailing lessons and activities. Now, the foundation's primary purpose is to teach sailing and sailboat racing while instilling the values of fitness, self-reliance, responsibility, teamwork, and sportsmanship. And here is their current location, and the location as proposed as part of this license agreement is 2,500 square feet, and it's just as you come into Marina 1 off to your left. Here's a visual of it on the public side of the marina. You'll see their dry boat storage there, as well as some of their other vessels. Now, the license terms, again, a 5-year initial term and one 5-year option. Base rent, $776, or is it $78? We'll get that straightened out. We're going to get our $2 out of them if they like it or not. And it does have annual rent adjustments, and those go along with or coincide with the adjustments to our recreational slips, the 35-footers. So if those go up 2%, which is generally our standard every year, this will go up 2% as well. So that's how their lease rate is determined. So that's pretty much it. These folks are tenants in good standing. They're prompt with their payments, and they're a very vital part of our harbor community. And with that, I welcome any questions. And I know there are representatives of the Youth Sailing Foundation here to address you as well.
Yes, thank you. Any questions? Yeah. Any questions for Mr. Bossi? Okay, I believe Craig is here and wanted to address. Sorry, that's okay. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Chair Spicer and Commissioners. We just wanted to come here tonight and thank you on behalf of the Santa Barbara Youth Sailing Foundation, our board, the parents, the sailors, for your support through the years. I believe with 1968, it's our 50th year anniversary this year. So we're proud to be upstanding members and participants in the harbor. And I just wanted to give you just a very short snippet of the organization. We have one full-time employee, Nick Kashak, who is our director of the program. He's actually a UCSB graduate and moved away and actually came back to direct the program and does a fine job for us. And on a summer program basis, we have 10 two-week programs where we have approximately 150 youth from the greater Santa Barbara area. We introduce them to sailing, to the ocean, and to the great waterways that we have here in Santa Barbara. And many of those sailors are first-time sailors and first-time participants in the ocean. And a portion of those, we're a 501c3 organization. We're separate from the Santa Barbara Yacht Club, but we have a very, very close-knit relationship with the Yacht Club. And as a part of that, the Santa Barbara Yacht Club Women's Group raises money every year and donates a scholarship fund for us in which we introduce a handful of sailors every year who have wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to be introduced to the ocean or to sailing. And a portion of those, about 15 kids a year, are from the Police Activities League. So I just wanted to let you know that. So we're proud to be a part of the community and proud to introduce and have the opportunity to introduce a large number of kids on a yearly basis to the sport of sailing and teach them a lot through that. And we're thankful that you are giving us this opportunity in the harbor to be able to continue to do that. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer.
Thank you. Commissioner Kramer.
Yeah, I don't have any question. I just think you're a great organization, and I think you're wonderful in the harbor.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yes, I have a question. Do you have any connection to U.S. sailing? Are you funneling the kids into any U.S. sailing programs?
There are many individual sailors, and we have two purposes. One is we have what I just described to you as introducing a large number of kids, 7 to 12, in the greater Santa Barbara community into the sport of sailing, to the ocean, to the water. And then we have roughly 50 kids who sail on Santa Barbara high school sailing teams, as well as in other types of boats. And many of those kids, aged anywhere from 12 to 17 years old, actually travel around the United States and travel. We have a couple of world sailors, and they have a close affiliation with U.S. sailing. And in a lot of the events that they attend and that they register for, they're required to have a U.S. sailing registration or a membership.
Correct.
Okay, so
Okay.
does that answer?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. I think I asked that question last year. I'm glad you answered that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any questions for Mr. Bossy, then I would ask for a recommendation.
Recommendation to approve as noted.
Okay, is there a second? There's a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Congratulations. Welcome back aboard. Okay, our last numbered item tonight, number 8. Emily, will you read that to us?
Yes. Item 8, proposed assignment of lease agreement number 25727, Deep Blue Sea, located at 219 C Stearns Wharf. Recommendation that the Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approve the assignment of the lease agreement number 25727 from John Marshall and Melissa Schumacher, DBA Deep Blue Sea, to JBC Investments Holding, LLC, for the 392 square foot retail store located at 219 C Stearns Wharf.
Thank you. Mr. Bossy again.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. John Marshall purchased Deep Blue Sea and assumed the lease through an assignment process back in 2002. The current lease expires on November 30th of 2021 and also has one 5-year option attached to it. The hatched area is the location for Deep Blue Sea. It's 392 square feet. It's pretty much an exact mirror of the spot next to it, which is the Mother Stearns Candy Shop. And again, it's at 219C Stearns Wharf. Now, as with all of our proposed lease assignments, the terms of the lease remain the same. So this is a 5-year initial term and one 5-year option. The lease currently has, it just started the 3rd year of the lease. So it'll have those 3 years and again the option. They currently pay an average of $2,329.66 per month, and that's adjusted seasonally. So some months, summer months are higher, winter months are lower. It helps folks out. We do that quite a bit with our tenants out on the wharf. There is an annual rent adjustment, which is a cost of living increase or CPI based on the consumer price index, which I believe currently is in the high 3s, low 4s, which is significantly different than it's been in the past. There's also a percentage rent clause in there, 10% of the tenant's gross. Now, the permitted uses, again, will stay the same. Their primary specialty is to use the premises as a store carrying novelty items, gifts, souvenirs, and toys. And then they do have a secondary specialty, which is they can also use the premises for the sale of T-shirts and sweatshirts, general merchandise, costume jewelry, etc. Now, with this proposed it's lease assignment, it has been requested by the existing owners, as those owners were noted in the description by Emily, and there are no change to the existing terms. The proposed new owners would be Mr. and Mrs. James Carr, and they are the current owners of Mother Stern's Candy Shop. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the proposed lease assignment.
Okay. Any questions? Jim?
In here, you state that there have been some unfortunate interactions. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, there were some, I think we got off on the wrong foot, and it just sort of stuck. So we want to move on and fix some of the issues. But there were some, fairly minor parking issues and dog running loose and a lot of merchandise outside the store, which really isn't allowed. Over the years, we've allowed a little bit of it, and admittedly, there's been quite a bit of creep of that. So we're in the process of getting everybody to clean it up. And then I think what we agreed on years ago was, a postcard rack and, maybe something else, but just not a huge expansion out onto the, so that was one of the issues. And so we just, I think we got on the wrong foot. I think we'd like to take the high road.
Okay.
And after careful consultation with the city administrator and the city attorney, we came to the conclusion that this is the way to go.
How long ago were those interactions?
Well, they've only been in Mother Stern's Candy since what was it, April or something? May. So, and I will say that they brought this merchandise displays inside and took care of those issues.
Okay. And so this is to assign the lease to a new leasee that's a current leasee on the wharf.
Correct. So now they'll have two leases which are immediately adjacent. There's even a connecting door.
Okay.
And so the kids can go get candy and then go get other kids' stuff, toys and things.
So we're not extending the lease.
No.
We're just assigning the existing.
The existing term.
Okay.
Correct.
And there's 3 years left on the existing lease plus the option?
Plus the option, which
Right.
of 5 years to extend, which is at the tenant's discretion.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Reben, I do appreciate that your point of taking the high road, and I would request that both the lessee and city do every effort they can to make sure that this moves forward gently and amenably so that it's good for all sides. It's surprising that somebody would treat their landlord with maybe some aggression, but then again, that's somebody's interpretation. So if both sides work to make this a good relationship, I think the city would benefit. So I appreciate that. So with that, we have a recommendation in front of us.
If I may
please,
just add one more
please.
thing. The sellers, John Marshall and Melissa Schumacher from Deep Blue Sea, are here in attendance tonight, as is Barbara Jo Carr, who would be perhaps part of the corporation that's half of the corporation.
Sure.
with her husband that would take over the Blue Sea lease, which is how the candy shop is held as well.
Very good. Great. We have a recommendation in front
So
of us.
moved.
There's a first.
Excuse me, Commissioners, can I just be heard briefly?
Just one moment. Do you have a slip to fill out? Okay. Yes, please.
My
Please.
name's Megan Witham. I met Mr. Reedman before, and good evening. I represent JBC Investment Holdings, so I'm just here to introduce ourselves. I just wanted to speak to the topic that was just in discussion. As I think Mr. Reedman indicated, I thought all sides chalked that up to being off to a bad start. We tried to pin down what the issue was. I think it was primarily just one interaction about parking, and I'm speaking from memory, but I think that was in May, if I'm not mistaken, and that subsequently we've been talking and everybody is committed to moving forward in a positive and productive manner. So just wanted to thank you for having us tonight and for your consideration. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But
That's great, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, we've gotten a first. Was there a second to the recommendation?
Second.
There's a second. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay. Thank you. That item is complete. Mr. Reedman, any staff communications?
Yes, Mr. Cronman has some, but I believe the Commissioner Kramer may have something as well, so whichever way you'd like to start.
Well, or Commissioner Sloan also, the two of us at the meeting. I've said more than you have this evening, so it's your turn.
Okay. Yeah, just as I think we've brought here a number of times, Betsy and I are on the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Committee, and so we continue to meet, and we meet twice a month right now, every other Tuesday, to go through taking a look at the sea level rise maps and to talk about what some adaptation strategies might be for the city, and we're developing all of that. But one meeting I would like to make everybody aware of is next Tuesday. We will talk about the harbor and the waterfront and the impact to that. And so we have a consultant that will address that. And so I would encourage anybody, whether it's on the commission or in the public, that wants to attend this meeting. It's at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, and it's in conference room 15, I think is the right number, right here adjacent to these quarters. And so I would encourage anybody that has an interest in that to please attend.
And there's also an overview of the whole issue in this week's Independent, what it's worth, which gives an idea of what it's all about. Worth reading, actually. So, thank you.
Great. Mr. Croman.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, as is always the case when we have storms and other natural events around the waterfront, we'd like to report out to you how things went. These series of storms in the last week, good news, bad news. The good news is that we didn't have a lot of damage. The bad news, of course, is, we need to fill up our lakes. It didn't, the storms didn't prove out to be as plentiful and robust as they had predicted, but it was really windy on the ocean and down around the harbor, a steady 25 knots for like 3 days with gusts to 40 knots, but nobody went aground from the anchorage or the mooring area. That was the good news. There were no significant facilities damaged. One piling near where the ocean meets the beach was torn loose from Stearns Wharf. It was found on West Beach. Plus, we had one piling lost from Stearns Wharf in an earlier storm, a storm earlier this month. There was one personnel rescue in the anchorage. It's in wildfires and ocean storms, what have you. There's always somebody who's going to tough it out and stay there. And ultimately, we had to go rescue that individual, and it's, lucky for them, they weren't hurt, and lucky for our patrol officers, neither they were hurt and our rescue vessel wasn't hurt. But it's just a reminder, when these storms are predicted, people need to come to safety, and we will always find a place. We are a legislatively designated harbor of safe refuge. We will always find a place to put a boat. You know, we'll worry about the slip fees once they're in, but the point is life and life safety stuff first. So that's just a respectful reminder. We had 2 sunken boats in the harbor at the beginning of these storms. Hard to tell whether they were down flooded from the rain or one of them probably was small, or maybe a reverse intake. A smaller sized aluminum lobster, almost a skiff, between a skiff and a boat. They self-salvaged. They got it up. It was hanging by its dock lines. The other one, much different. On H-Finger, we had a boat built in 1936, sank to the seafloor. Harbor Patrol and worked with Coast Guard. They immediately got a boom around it, got oil absorbent pads in the containment area. The boat was a liveaboard, and so the good news is it didn't have a lot of fuel on it, so it was very little petroleum leaked out of it. The owner, who was in Mexico, I believe is on his way back. He is working with one of our local salvage companies as the owner and the responsible party to get this cleaned up, and so we'll be working with them in the upcoming week to have the salvage operation completed and carry on from there. So that completes my report on that level. We also, these things unfold after we submit our reports. There were a couple other items. One, we had a boat fire a few days ago. A vessel from San Pedro was offshore and had an exhaust stack fire. It's not an uncommon thing when exhaust overheats and can catch fire with adjacent wood. And the wood, apparently, it was bracing the exhaust stack as it started to move around, caught fire. Came into the harbor. We were the closest place they could get to, and a combination of the owner of the vessel with Harbor Patrol and fire department assistance, we got the fire extinguished rapidly. And he's going to be repairing his boat in the next couple of days and hopefully returning to his business as a squid light boat. So that pretty much concludes all the happenings from around the waterfront in terms of the storms and what have you from the last week or two. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mick. Any questions? All right. Well, it's great to know that there's no boats on the beach from the Anchorage area. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Croman. With that, we are at adjournment if there's a motion. That looks like we got a first and a second here. So. Merritt and then Betsy. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody.